This video will cover the second part of 2.8 on functions, and this part 2 is on composition of functions. So composition of function involves placing one function inside of another one to create a new function. So if you'll think back to when we first started talking about functions, and we talked about f of 2 meant to take the value 2 and put it in place of all the x's in the function f. So really, composition of functions isn't any different in that we're still going to be substituting into x, but instead of a value, we're going to be substituting a function. Alright, so you can see it written maybe two ways. So if you see f and this little circle means composite, f composite g of x means to take the function g of x and fill it in to the function f. And then g composite f means to take the function f and fill it in to the function g, just as if you were filling in a number, but instead of a number, you're filling in a function. These two things we would read as f of g of x and g of f of x. Alright, so let's try a couple of composition of functions. Alright, I have two functions f and g. F is the square root of x plus 4, and g is 2 over x. So the first one I want to find is f composite g. So I want to find f of g of x. So I'm going to take this function right here, g of x. So g of x is its own little thing here. G of x, and I want to fill it in to the function f. Alright, to do that I take the function f, which is square root of x plus 4, and everywhere there's an x, I'm going to put 2 over x. So instead of writing this x, I'm going to write 2 over x, which is the function g, plus 4. Alright, and that is the f of g of x. Now I want to find f of g of 2. Alright, so I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to fill it in everywhere there's an x. So 2 over, instead of writing x, I'm going to write 2 plus 4, give me 1 plus 4, which is the square root of 5. And it has no factors that I can take the square root of besides 1, so it can't get any simpler than that. Alright, what if I'm asked to find g of f of x? So this time, I'm going to take the function f, and I'm going to fill it into the function g. Alright, so there's g, and inside of that, I want to fill in everywhere there's an x. I want to put the function f. Alright, so the function g, we said, is 2 over x. So that's the function I want to use, but instead of writing this x, I'm going to replace it with the function f. So we should have 2 over the square root of x plus 4. And then I want to find g of f of 5. So I'm going to take 5 and fill it into this function here. So that'll be 2 over. Instead of writing x, I'll write 5. So that'll be 2 over the square root of 9. The square root of 9 is 3. Alright, let's look over to the second page here. Alright, we have two new functions. We have f of x is the square root of x minus 1, and g of x is 2x plus 5. And so I want to find f of g of x and then give the domain. So remember, there are three equations we've talked about where we talked about the domain. The first one was linear. Alright, and we said the domain was anything between negative infinity and positive infinity. Then we talked about square root. Alright, where we said to find it, you take what's under the radical sign and set it greater than or equal to 0 and solve for x. And then we talked about rational. Alright, where we took the denominator and we said we don't want it to equal 0. So we set it and found what made it 0, and then anything else was in the domain. Alright, so those are the only three we've talked about. So as we go through and look at these compositions, alright, it should be one of these three types of equations. Alright, so we're going to find f of g of x. Alright, so f of g of x. So I'm going to take g, I'm going to fill it into f. So the function f is x minus 1, but instead of writing x, I'm going to write 2x plus 5, because that's g minus 1. Alright, and then that'll simplify to 2x plus 4. Alright, so now if I want the domain, I'm going to look to see what type of equation is it. This is a square root. So to find the square root, I take what's under the radical sign and set it greater than or equal to 0 and solve for x. So I'll say 2x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 0. And when I solve, I'll get x is greater than or equal to negative 2, which could be written negative 2 to infinity. So either way, I took what was under the radical sign, solved for x by subtracting 4 from both sides, then dividing both sides by 2. That gave me x is greater than or equal to negative 2, and I can write the answer in either of these ways. Okay, let's look at number 4. It wants us to find g of f of x and then give its domain. So let's see, g of f of x. So I'm going to take f of x and I'll fill it in to g. Now g says 2 times x plus 5. So 2x plus 5 is g, but instead of putting that x there, I'm going to put the function f, which is the square root of x minus 1. Alright, I can't multiply 2 times the square root of x plus 1 and get 2x minus 2. To be able to do that, this would also have the 2 would have to be under a square root sign. So you can only multiply the radicands if they are under the exact same radical sign. So they both have to be square roots or both cube roots, or neither of them have a radical sign to be able to multiply them. So that's as far as we can take that. But we can find the domain. Alright, so when I look at this equation, I see a square root. Alright, so that means I'm going to take what's under the radical sign. I'm going to set it greater than or equal to 0 and solve for x. Alright, so this tells me that it can be anything greater than or equal to 1, and I can write it in interval notation, bracket 1, comma, infinity. Alright, I want you to take note that the only time I'm going to get a number out of a function is when I put a number in. So on these last three, we didn't substitute any values anywhere. Alright, and so f of g of x and g of f of x are simply functions. You can't solve that. Okay, there's nothing, you can't fill in a value because I haven't given you one. Alright, but on the previous page, alright, same thing. Alright, we first we found the function, the composition, and then they gave us a number and we could fill it in and get a number out. Alright, so here we did the composition, g of f of x gave us this function, and then they gave us a number which we were able to fill in and get a number out.